Morning, everybody. I just want to clarify a few things, and I think this is one of the dangers of online courses and changing things, and it all works out. But let me just make a few comments about the capstone essay, the rough draft, which is it's due tonight by midnight, and I will be evaluating those. But let me talk a little bit about the entirety of the project. Okay, there's a huge module that has, has a lot of links, it has a lot of information, a couple of PowerPoints, and I mentioned this. Um, but the overall final draft of the essay only needs to be 6 to 8 pages long. In its entirety, it's about a 20-page thing, by the time you factor rough drafts, annotated bib, overview, and then a recast, which we're going to work on next week. That'll be your final piece for the capstone. But because it's summer, because of the nature of the timing, the actual final draft of the argumentative piece of the capstone that you should be working on or have finished working on now, um, that's funny, huh? Is 6 to 8 pages. Now, in compiling that 6 to 8 pages, I want to reiterate a few things. Okay, one, when you begin that essay, you have to connect to your reader. You have to engage. I told you this before. You don't like to read boring stuff, neither does anyone else. All right, you might really care a ton about gun control, say, or whatever it is you're writing about. But your reader might not know or care or why he or she should care. So the key is that as you begin, you connect to a contemporary event, a current happening. It has to be made relevant. Okay, so as you begin that essay, you want to start with something that pulls into focus why this is an issue, why this is even warranted. Stephen Toulmin, who's a great logician, he talks about how arguments have to have a claim, okay, so a thesis, a point, a position. They have to have evidence, support. We know that all the various rhetorical appeals, appealing to emotion, appealing, obviously, it has to be logical, and the establishment of that ethos or credibility. But in addition to that, you have to have a warrant, which means there has to be a reason for the argument. You can't argue for a policy change if the policy that you want changed isn't bad or isn't necessary. So it's part of your job to establish that for the reader. And you don't want to tell the reader, this is what I'm going to do in this paper. Never say that, okay? You just do it, all right? So if you want the gun laws concealed, let's say you're looking at concealed carry and you think it should be abolished, you don't say in this paper I'm going to show why concealed carry should be abolished. No, you just say concealed carry laws should be abolished because boom, boom, boom. All right, so you're asserting your position, you're stating it, and then you'll use your evidence, your outside resources, the development of your reasonable argument. You allow that then to develop throughout the rest of the paper. Okay. The key way to make someone care about that is to maybe begin with an incident where a concealed carry law was necessary or where it wasn't, where whatever your position might be, but start with something real, something that a reader can get his or her hands on. All right, so if you talk about maybe you talk about the recent Parkland shootings, and you want to look at maybe educators carrying weapons, or I don't know, I'm not even suggesting anyone's doing this, just to give you some examples, but you would begin with that. We saw one of the greatest tragedies in our country, blah blah blah, so you refresh the reader's memory and you use that to springboard, to launch into your position on the issue. So the development of the introduction of this essay is going to be extensive. All right, you don't walk into it mid-conversation. You have to build into it. You have to give your reader some time to think about why this is important before you get to your position, to your claim, to your thesis, right? So you allow some time to develop that. So maybe you start with the discussion of a current event or whatever it might be that links it. Then you move into a little bit of background or establishment of the controversy over the issue that's connected to that event. Then maybe by paragraph 3, say, you're finally starting your actual thesis or basing like your position in that. So think about developing, elaborating on your ideas, and then you use the remainder of the paper to provide support for that. Um, Hopefully that was clear. Also, integrating the outside source material, you have to keep in mind this is your argument, your position. You're using your secondary sources to support what you believe. All right. You're not just saying, oh, here's what all the experts say, and doing a lit review of it. Instead, you have a position, and then you smoothly integrate those outside sources to bolster your own argument. So you want to be mindful of that as you integrate those sources. Now, you don't randomly drop quotes in or paraphrases in from outside sources either, right? You have to, I usually call it a quote sandwich, but you have to sandwich them. So you move into the quote, you preview, meaning, okay, we know we're going to introduce something here and it's clearly connected to what I'm saying. So you preview it, maybe you credential that author, renowned psychologist Sigmund Freud. I don't think you're probably using Freud, but believes yada, yada, yada. And then you give that quote. And so you preview the signal phrase, you present the quote, and then this is the most critical part, follow through. You have to relate the significance of what it is that you've just said. Okay, so you don't want the reader to have to do all that legwork. You're going to make it clear. You're going to illustrate how that particular piece of information supports what it is you're trying to use it to bolster in your paper. So it's a sandwich, a preview, presentation, and a follow through. So if you think about it that way, it should help you really build some body around those quotes. You don't want them just hanging there loosely. You have to remember, and I know I've written this on a lot of your papers, do not think that the reader is in your mind, because he's not. So you've been thinking about this. You've been reading research on this. You've been processing this, but your reader has not. So it's your job to fill in those gaps. So just think a little bit about that as you're developing your paper. Excuse me. Again, the final draft of this won't be due until I want to say Sunday night. I'm sorry about that because if I'm not looking right at the dates, I don't have it maybe perfectly straight. So I will put that on the news page, and of course it'll show up in your Dropbox. But the rough draft is due tonight, and that rough draft needs to be a complete rough draft. I don't want to look at something that's only 2 pages, all right, and say, oh, it's just a rough draft, I'm going to complete it later. I want you to put some effort into this paper, something that gives the reader an opportunity to really review. Once I get them all tomorrow morning, I will create groups. And again, I'm going to ask that you upload your essay into your group, and then you're going to peer review. Those take some time, all right? So that'll be a big chunk of what you're doing. And it's beneficial on 2 fronts. First of all, you're providing feedback for your peer, and you're receiving feedback, but also it helps to see what other people are doing. So when you're reading someone else's argument, you're getting exposed to some other strategies, some other writing styles, some other language nuances, and that's often beneficial when you're drafting your own essay. Use some of those resources I've posted, all right? Do some of your own research. You're writing a position paper. Some of you will use a counter argument, some of you will not, and that's okay, okay? Position-based papers, you're going to at least anticipate the opposition. I absolutely expect that you will have read alternate positions on the issue. That doesn't mean you have to give them time in your essay and counter them. Sometimes you can just anticipate the opposition. If I know someone's going to say something, I'm going to build my own argument stronger at that place, I guess, or in that support. So think about that. Hopefully this answers questions or any questions that you might have, but I would hope that you would email me any specific questions. After I start seeing some of the drafts, I will probably post some just some keys and some points to take into consideration as you revise, because you'll be revising over the next 4 or 5 days. So good luck. I'm sorry that many of you will be taking your day or doing a lot of writing in your evening, but really embrace it and think about what makes it interesting and why you care about it. That should shine through on the draft. I want to see your voice. I want to see your style. You all write very differently, and I think that's a good thing, right? There's no tried and true way to address your particular issue or to develop your position paper. We've seen already multiple styles of argument, and I want you to find yours, and I want you to find what's most effective. Must use attribution. Okay, so anything that you pull from outside sources absolutely has to be documented. Again, I don't care if you use MLA or APA, but you can't do some hybrid of them. All right. If you're going to use MLA, then you're going to use MLA throughout. If you're going to use APA, the same holds true. All right. I don't want to see that blending. A lot of times people do it. You don't have to have it committed to memory. Look it up. That's why the internet is fabulous, right? You have a lot of resources available. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Please email me, text me, let me know if you have any questions or problems as you're working your way through this, but know that I will give you some pretty comprehensive feedback on the draft too. And I want to see you working through some of these ideas. Have a fantastic day.